A Worn Path by Eudora Welty. Things to know about Eudora Welty. First of all, she is best known as a writer of short stories about the American South. She lived most of her life. Well, there was a time in her life that she traveled various places, but she was born and died in Jackson, Mississippi, so that was home for her. And if you look at a lot of the stories she's written, they are set in Mississippi. In fact, all the ones that I have read by her are set in Mississippi. She won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction for her novel The Optimist's Daughter in 1973 when she was in her early 60s. So she won a Pulitzer in her early 60s, and Katherine Ann Porter won a Pulitzer in her early 70s. So my 54-year-old self is just overwhelmed with hope here. Okay, so that's just a little bit of background on and what you see out of her. So with Welty, if you think back to the regionalism works that we looked at from the 1800s, from that era of the last part of the 19th century, regionalism was a big concept there. So you can definitely see, even though we're now in the 19th century, Eudora Welty is definitely a regionalist writer. All right, so in A Worn Path, our main character, our protagonist, is Phoenix Jackson. She is an older African-American woman in Mississippi around 1940. By virtue of the fact that she is older, we can kind of, if we run the clock back, we can see that she would have been born into slavery. Was probably a fairly small child at that point, and might not even have a lot of clear memories of it. But even at this point, even though slavery is long past, again, we're in the 20th century, still you're looking at a time where the Jim Crow laws were still, definitely in effect in the South. And that if you were African American, you couldn't be guaranteed a fair trial. You couldn't be guaranteed protection if anything happened to you that shouldn't happen to you. You couldn't, well, we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the Hunter. Okay, so the thing that she's doing here, she is going into town to get medicine for her grandson. And she lives a pretty good distance from Natchez, which is where she's going to get the medicine. And again, she's an older woman. She's not super strong to the extent that, she's a bit frail in some ways. But obviously, she's very determined. And it's kind of a mind over matter thing with her that she makes herself, she's that kind of strong that she's going to get to Natchez. She's getting this medicine for her grandson. She is a little bit absent-minded, but then again, at her age, and she does make the comment to somebody that she's the oldest person she knows, that you expect somebody to be absent-minded at that age. Good grief, I'm a lot younger than that, and I can be absent-minded, but then again, so can some of you, so it's all good. So, but certainly, it's what we would expect from her. It's not a big surprise. Now, her name is Phoenix. That doesn't have anything to do with Phoenix, Arizona. We can sort of figure that the reason Welty gave the character this name is about the bird, the phoenix, who burns and rises from the ashes. I should have a period there after ashes, but anyway. And so Welty's trying to get across the idea that Phoenix has probably been through a lot of stuff, but she keeps going. She keeps rising up, and no matter what has happened to pull her down, she rises from the ashes and moves and keeps on keeping on. All right, one of the people that she runs into on her trip is a hunter, and you can see the picture here that with the hunter with the gun on her. These are apparently photos that somebody had posted from a film version of A Worn Path. So it's kind of cool to have pictures that went really, really well with these different things in the story. Now, when we look at what society would have deemed a majority, an in-power group, the hunter has it over Phoenix any way you slice it. He's white in a time, again, that African Americans really had no rights in the Deep South. Legally, they might have had rights, but societally, they did not. He's a man. She's a woman. He's young. She's old. Now, I don't mean young as in super young, but compared to her, he's young. Now, when he's holding that gun on her, there's a pretty good bet that he never really had any intention to pull the trigger. He's just messing with her. But here's the thing. Phoenix knows that if he shoots her, he's going to get away with it. Probably nobody would ever have any reason to associate him with shooting her. This is way back before they were running ballistics tests and all that, I'm pretty confident. But it wouldn't have mattered. If you had a group of people standing there watching him shoot her, wouldn't have mattered. He's a white man. She's an African American woman. That time in Mississippi, he's going to get away with it. So she knows that the only thing that's keeping him from shooting her is his decision not to shoot her. And so the fact that she is standing there not flinching says a lot about her character and about her own sense of bravery and just her will not to let him see her sweat, not to let him see fear, because she knows all that and he knows she knows that he could get away with it, yet she doesn't back down. He certainly has an air of superiority toward her, and again, because of his race, gender, and age, he does feel superior to her. He isn't, but he feels that way. She does sort of get the last laugh on him because he drops a nickel and she picks it up and keeps it. Now, the nickel should have a period there after today, too. The nickel today would be worth closer to $1. So it's even at that, it's still not like it's a lot of money, but it's the principle of the thing that it was something he lost and that she got to keep something of his that she sort of enjoys. All right, then we look at the women in the doctor's office, receptionists, nurses, people that are there. You've got one who's sympathetic toward her to a point. The other one very impatient with her and pretty rude. But in both cases, they're people that see her more as a child than as a respected adult. When they refer to her as grandma, when anybody refers to her as grandma, that's not somebody showing her respect or affection. If they had really been being respectful toward her, they would have called her Miss Jackson. The thought here is that in the culture of the time, you didn't say Mrs. So-and-so to an African-American woman because that is basically putting her on the same level you are. And so grandma or uncle or whatever, that was sort of along the same lines of saying boy at that time. It wasn't a thing of, oh, you're like my grandma. It's, I'm better than you are and I'm just calling you grandma. Okay. So I want to be sure y'all are clear on that because this is way before my time and certainly way before yours and you might not necessarily understand that that's where that is going. And when they do, the one lady does give her money, they're trying to get her on her way, and it's more a matter of pity than, oh, I really feel bad for her, let me give her some money, let me help her. It's more of a pity kind of giving than it is, I'm really trying to be helpful. So the prejudices we see toward Phoenix in this story, ageism, racism, and sexism. People looking down on her because she's old. People looking down on her because of her race. People, the hunter particularly rather, looking down on her because she's a woman. They treat her as though they're superior, as though she's a child. And in the case of the hunter, for sure, exercises that power he knows he has over her. Because socially and societally, they know they're dominant. And they see themselves as dominant. They don't see Phoenix as she's just like I am, only older or a different race. It's a matter of thinking that they're better. Literary devices that I want you to know from this story. The first is ambiguity. Now, this is, I would imagine, a new term for you. And that just means something's open to more than one interpretation. Now, Phoenix is asked when she comes into the doctor's office about her grandson being dead, and she's like, oh, no, he's not really dead. But the fact that this comes up has made plenty of readers wonder over time, had he actually died, whether it was from swallowing lye or from the after effects of swallowing lye, and that Phoenix has got it in her head that he's still alive. I know with my own mother, there are plenty of relatives now who are alive in her head that haven't been alive in 30 or 40 years. And that's kind of what they're thinking, the thinking is here. Eudora Welty never completely clears that up for us, either in the story or in reality. And so the fact that we could interpret it that way means that the ending is ambiguous. Characterization, the way an author develops a character. Welty develops Phoenix for us both physically and behaviorally. She refers to her as being very old and small. We know she's African American. She's determined. She's going to make that long walk into town. The fact that she is absent-minded on occasion. As she's going through the woods, she talks to everything. She talks to trees. She talks to animals. You know, and it's not like she thinks they can all talk back to her, but that she's talking to herself, you know, just kind of, whether it's to keep herself company along the way or, you know, you can kind of read that however you want to. she stands her ground. She doesn't show fear, and she does have plenty of common sense. And then we have the setting, which is the time and place during which a work of literature occurs. Now, this is around Christmas time. We find out in the beginning it's in December. That is a little less important than the fact that it takes place in and near Natchez, Mississippi during the late 30s, early 40s. Again, you move this to the South now, not that you don't have some racial issues going on, but certainly nothing like it was in Mississippi in that particular time frame. And the fact that it is in the Deep South, and Mississippi was noted really for some of the worst atrocities when it came to things like lynchings and things like that. So the fact that it is in Mississippi during this time frame is very critical to our understanding of the story. Okay, well, that's it for Warren Path. Again, if you have questions, shoot me a remind message, and I will be happy to answer them for you.